Hey everyone, in this video we are going to go over creating a Create React app and then deploying it to Heroku. We will use the node.js framework called ExpressJS, and we'll use that to serve our React app. Now we're going to use Heroku, which will take control over the build process, and if you want to use Babel or anything like that, you can create npm scripts to convert your code and then deploy that and compile that on Heroku when you deploy. Now, Create React App is one of the easiest ways to get going creating a React app, as you may be aware. But one of the things that I see most often is people maybe eject the app because they want to put it inside of their own server, or they want to have a monolithic application. So they have a front-end client folder and they may have a server folder, but really it's a bit cumbersome to do that, and you don't need to do it at all. You can use the Create React app out of the box, and all you need to do is just tack on a server. So in this video, I'm just going to walk you through how I do it. Of course, there may be better ways. There could be, there's certainly a lot of different ways that people can do this. But this is just the approach that I like to take. So hopefully this will teach you some of the cool little tricks that I do, and I'll try and give as much reason why I do what I do as well. So this is the Create React app, and we're just going to create an example application. So if we just jump into terminal and do that now, and I'm just going to call our app Create React app Express example, and we're going to push this to Heroku as well. You can name this file whatever you like. So that'll go away and install the dependencies. I'm just using Yarn, but you can use npm5 if you wish. But Express is the framework. It's really popular. It's been in the version 4 for some time. It does require some modifications to do some things that other frameworks like Happy.js and Koa kind of do out of the box, I'd say. One of the things which I haven't used myself is things like the async and await functions. With Express, I believe that the Express version 5 may come with that baked in, and there's certainly less. There's a lot less that you need to do to maybe get it to work with version 4. I don't know if it works. I honestly haven't used it, and I'm only starting to use that within React and things like that itself. Now, so this is what we will be using. I have this installed globally as a dependency, but you can install it with your individual projects, which I'd recommend, and you'll get the latest version. It's on version 4.15.4 at the moment. There's some really great examples on the GitHub for this as well. So if we pop over to GitHub and have a look, you'll see it's got 33,000 plus stars on there. So it's a really popular framework. And I myself have contributed to this repo, just updating some of the examples because there were lacking some modern ES 2015 and above features and things. So it's really popular framework. I'd definitely try and have a look if you haven't seen it already. And it's they've got a really good collaborator and contributing guide and guidelines. So definitely jump in. There's definitely a lot of issues and pull requests pending, so it's a really popular project. You should definitely check it out. And of course, we're going to be using Heroku, and to use Heroku and to create React app, we will need to use a build pack. And a build pack is just something that you tell Heroku to consider when you are building the application. So if you've used Ruby on Rails or anything like that, you'll notice when you deploy your app that it kind of just does all of the asset pipeline magic itself, and that's because Heroku has a built-in build pack for Ruby on Rails. But the Create React app, it's something that you need to specify yourself, and of course you can tell it that you wish to use Node and things like that. But with this, it will take care of some of the Create React app conventions. So it will create that build folder. When it's installing the dependencies, it will make sure that you're in development mode, and then it'll switch over to production and things like that. But yeah, this guide's quite in depth, and it kind of just goes over what you'll need to do if you want to create any sort of changes, or you want some clean URLs in there. If you don't want to use a server, you can customize it in a really good way on here, and proxies and HTTPS support and things. There's a lot of information on here. Definitely check it out. We probably won't dive into a lot of this in this episode. We're literally just going to use it so it is aware of it on the build process. So back in terminal, our app has been been created. And if we pop over to the folder, I'm just going to clear the screen, type in clear, and we will now look to install some additional dependencies. But first of all, let's open our application on its default port 3000. We should see that we'll get the default, welcome to React screen that you do with every Create React app. So it's really cool. That's working. We know that's working. Now the next thing is to install some dependencies. So I'm using Yarn. You can use npm5 like I said before, but I'm going to add some additional dependencies here. So we will need the Express. We'll need compression, which is just an additional Express module, which is great for production, and we are going to use Morgan. Now Morgan, based on Dexter Morgan, is a package that allows you to log your Express requests and responses and things like that. It's a really good logging middleware, and I guess it's based on Dexter because it looks at everything, it spies on everything, it's always there. And I guess Dexter was a bit like that as well, as creepy as that sounds. So let's get started. I'm just going to clear this out, and if we open this in I'm going to open this in Atom, and if we pop over to the package.json file, we should see that we have got our dependencies. So we've got Express, Morgan, React, React DOM, compression, and React scripts as a dev dependency. And this is kind of, except these things, this is what you get default out of the Create React app. But we're adding these so we can create our project. Now, what we'll do is I'm just going to create a file, and I'm going to create this file called server.js. You can call this whatever you like, but server.js kind of explains what it is. And we're going to use the create server function from the HTTP library. Now we're not using Babel in this project, so I can't use the import function. It's not part of Node 8 yet, I think. These kind of still have to use the module exports and that thing. As far as I'm aware, you may be able to use it now, but this is fine. We'll use Express, and we'll require Express. We'll also need to import our compression, and we'll install Morgan. Const Morgan equals Morgan, and we'll bring in the path module as well, and that's on path. Now path and the HTTP, this module is built into Node, if you've been using Node before. Now one of the things that you'll need to do next is create a function that defines your application, that defines Express. So we'll create a constant here called app, and we'll use Express. And this means we're just instantiating Express, and we're assigning it to the app variable constant. And you can create multiple apps in a file, and you can mount them. If you want to use WebSockets, you'll kind of have to do that. You'll need to create a WebSocket server and a web server, and you serve them together, or you'll serve them on separate ports, and protocols, but you'll create them in the same app. So there's a lot of things you can do there. And the other constant that I like to use is called dev. Now all of this is it gets the environment from the app, and that's something that Express will do by default. It'll assign its current environment from the node env environment variable. But what I like to say is if it's not equal to production, then we're in test or we're in the development environment. And that's kind of a few of the things that you only need to do to get started, and I'll show you why those are helpful. So if we are not in dev, we're in production, we will need to do a few things. One of the things that you'll find is a lot of people, by convention, disable the X powered by. Now with every Create React app, it kind of has a header that is set on every response, and it is the X powered by, and then it's Express. Now, people, I guess, remove this because of security vulnerabilities. If you're running Express, and it could be quite old, and somebody on GitHub files an issue to fix a security hole, there is a certain way in which you must do that, and I highly encourage you to read the Express README on how you report those. You don't just submit a PR, because that could, blast a hole in a lot of people's applications. And I guess this is a way to combat against that as well. This kind of just stops people, if they were to send a request, looking to see what server you're on. And if people go, oh, they're on Express, we can maybe try and exploit that. If you disable this, it makes that a little bit harder. Of course, they could still try and send the same requests if you've posted elsewhere that you're on Express and things like that. But X powered by is often removed in a lot of production apps that I see. I don't know why it's still actually in there. Doesn't really add a lot of value, I don't think. Then the other thing is, in production, we want to use the compression module. The compression module will just handle a few things for us, gzip and things like that. And that's all we need to do is add that middleware there, and that's what the app.use does. We're passing it no additional parameters, so it's not, it's literally just mounting that as app middleware. Then the other thing is we want to use Morgan. And now when we're in production, I like to use the common flag. And the common flag, it just logs certain stuff that is common amongst most apps, like the request path, any the query string, things like that are attached to it, and it'll return the status of it, simple things like that. It doesn't go into detail like the development environment does when it errors out. It doesn't log a lot of information. So definitely check out the repo for Morgan. It'll tell you a little bit more in detail, a bit better than I have there about that. I'll leave a link in the comments below, and also above in the card. You better view that now, I think. Cool. Then when we're not in production, one of the other things that we'll need to do is tell Express our routes. Now, in most React applications, you'll probably be using the React router, and the React router, of course, will use the hash history or the browser history functions. So URL, it's kind of a single page application, but obviously Express, when requests are coming into different paths, it's going to try and render that. It's obviously going to render a 404 message. So what we need to do is tell Express, hey, look, any requests that come in, if we haven't specified, please send the default create React app index page. And then I guess if you're using the React router with create React app, it'll then just default to let the React router take over. So what we'll do is use the Express static middleware, and what we need to do is just tell it where our static files will belong, and that is going to be our current directory and the build folder. And the build folder is something that create React app will create on build, and Heroku and the build pack will take care of that. The other route, the other middleware that we need to use is we need to say, look, on every request that comes in, because we don't have a built-in API for this at the moment, you may just want to have a single page application, maybe a React website, and it doesn't need to talk to a server or anything like that. It's literally all you're using is Node to serve it, which you don't need to do by default, but you can you could put some caching in here. That's kind of why and when you would use a custom server to do this. So this is kind of just a boilerplate to get you started doing that. But obviously we need to send the file for that, and we'll just fill it out now. It's going to be path resolve, our current directory name, build, and index.html. So that is by default what it will send. And if we look inside of the public folder, it's going to send this file here. And if we just update this to Express and create React app on Heroku, we'll see when we do push to production that file was correctly deployed. Excellent. So that's all about it for the production setup. There's a few things you can do in the development environment to make your life a little bit easier. And you can, certainly use. You could use Morgan, and you could use the dev flag, and there's a lot more that you could put in here to help you out. such as error handling and things like that, but we'll skip past that for now. Let's just create a quick constant called server, and we'll use the app constant up here, and of course we've appended app, all of this to our app, and then we're going to instantiate a new server using the create server function from the HTTP library. Obviously, of course, you can use HTTPS. In Heroku, you can now use SSL by default, so please feel free to check that out. There's a little bit of additional middleware that you can add to Express to fully support that. I'll link to that below. And then once we've instantiated that server, we need to listen. We need to listen on a port, but we haven't defined a port yet. So let's just finish creating this function. So we'll take in an error as the second parameter, and if there's an error, we just want to throw that error. And then when we have started the server, we just want to console log that out. Server started. Sometimes people will write inside of here, server started on localhost port 3000, but obviously in production, that message is pretty much meaningless. The server started, you kind of just want to know if you are debugging that the server started, so we'll not type that out at the moment. So port, of course, we will need to go back to creating. And above here, what I'll do is we'll just define a port. And this port, I like to use a simple method called normalize port, and we will pass in our process.env port, and if we don't have one, we will just use port 5000. And obviously that normalize port function hasn't been defined, so we will define that now, and that will just return parse int when we'll pass in port, and we'll convert that to an integer. We're almost there with our application, and the next thing to do that I'd like to do is just run this in development, but well, in production on our development machine. And the easiest way to do this is using the React scripts build tool and then running our node server. So we've got our port function and our normalize port and port all set up, and by default it's going to run on port 5000, and this is pretty much all that you need to run a custom server. One of the other things that people like to do is, obviously, like I've mentioned previously, is use this to do caching and set up an API and run a monolithic application. And this is a great starting point. And I think this is pretty much as bare bones as you need to run a Node server. And now, I'd like to remind you that you do not need to use Node to run a Create React app in production. You can literally just use, a static page. You can use the build pack from on Heroku to import all of your env variables and things like that. They're all public anyway, so you can just run it as a text file there and use some of their defaults. So let's get started by running our application. And what we'll do is I'll show you in the terminal here. If we just type node server, we'll see that our server has started. And if we pop over to Chrome and we change this to port 5000, we'll see that we cannot get /, and that's because inside of our application we only mounted this inside of the production environment. If we check the console, you'll see that we have Morgan logging out our request here. So we've got a 404, that was the response, and these are just the requests that came in. So let's give it a try in production. Let's run yarn build. What this will do is it'll run through the Create React app React scripts module and compile our server and optimize it for production, and it's very quick. With that done, it'll create a folder called build, and this is what we will use in production to send that index file when we request our website. If we now run node server, and if we prepend node env equals production, and this is just to trick our machine and the node process that think that we're in production, and if we open up localhost and refresh again, you'll see that we have the welcome to React page, and this is in production what it would look like. So it's brilliant. We're almost a step closer to deploying to Heroku. The next step is to do that. And remember that we are going to use this build pack. So I'm going to copy this build pack here. I'm going to come over to the terminal. I'm going to remove and close out of my server and the development server. And then I'm going to run Heroku create. And I'm not going to put in an app name because we're just going to let Heroku create a random name for us, but I am going to append that build pack URL. Don't forget to do that because it's very important. And now that is done, it will add a remote. So if I type, what we'll need to do, is initialize a new Git repository. If we just add in our files, check the status of those, and if we commit those files, I'm just going to call this initial files for now. And then we check our Git remote, it will not be there. But what we can do is, if we just run Heroku create again, create a new application, it will add that remote for us. And if I type git remote -v, we'll see that we have that Heroku remote. Great. Let's clear that out. And now we are going to push to Heroku. And that is simple as just doing git push Heroku master. But before we do that, it's best to define a proc file. So let's go ahead and do that. That's one thing that I forgot to do. Proc file, and this is just something that you do on Heroku. We need to tell it what process to run, because by default it's going to look for that. It will default to the start, and obviously we don't want to do that in production because that's for our development. Great, so we have our proc file defined that will run the node server, and if we just commit that to Git as well, proc file added, and then we run git push Heroku master, and that will deploy. Now, in order to use the Heroku create command, you must have Heroku installed on your machine. I use Homebrew to manage those dependencies. I'll leave a link in the description below, and you can learn how to install that. But I imagine if you're watching this, you maybe are using Homebrew, or you have the Heroku CLI installed. That's definitely worth checking out. And if we pop on over to Google while that is installing, you can see how you can install that. So if you're on Mac, Windows, Ubuntu, you can do that there. But on Heroku, it recommends that you use Homebrew, and that allows you to do some really cool things like log into your account, create new applications, delete new applications, restart them, scale the dynos up, things like that if you're paying for your applications, and set some environment variables and add contributors and things like that. So it's really cool. If we check on back over the terminal, you'll see that our application is compressing and it's launched, and it's now ready to open. So if we type Heroku open, that will open for us on new application. So there we have it. We have our production application running on Heroku. We used the Create React App module, and we used ExpressJS and the Create React App Heroku build pack. Now, this is a very, very basic setup, but it should allow you to start building on top of Heroku, building on top of Node, and most importantly, using React with a server. And that's all there is. So I hope this episode of React and Express has been helpful. If you do like it, please leave a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, please leave a thumbs down. And please subscribe. Please share this video if you think it'll help others as well. And I look forward to creating another video on this. So have a great day. Happy coding. All the best, guys.